Hello? Beep, beep, beep. Welcome back, all of you, to my next session on the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Prats and Dickheads at this extent, or professional dumbbells. I don't know, what do you want to call it? It's up to you, CIPD. Please yourself. Come be a warrior teacher. Stop messing about. Start in mid-March. Right, so here we go. Now, I love a good animal documentary as much as the next man. Just your average bloke watching television. The BBC does these rather well. One thinks, right? They do, and they genuinely do. They're most extraordinary wildlife programmes sold all over the world. You know the type of thing I mean. David Attenborough, bless him, he's still going. David Attenborough. Like Tollon Man, he's going nowhere. David Attenborough, they'll send him somewhere nice, like the Seychelles or the Caribbean, and he'll sort of waddle up to a pond and then hunch arthritically over a mollusk and tell us what the mollusk is all about. Here is the mollusk. In the wonderful way he does, right? So the CIPD have obviously now got their own version of David Attenborough, but it's a female version, well, a non-binary female version, called Davina Twattenborough. So I'd like to introduce her to her, because now we're going to talk about animals in the CIPD. Just watch.
Little Nemo, black clownfish are one of the species of fish that start out life as one sex, so say female, but at 2 years of age they actually swap and become male, and then at 5 years they swap back and become female again. So there's a lot of examples of that in the fish world, and we're talking about literally a full physiological change from male to female and back. And it's very evident in the fish world and in the insect world and all over. But anyway, as I say, I found that people don't really care about fish or insects. So I now talk about bigger animals. So here we are with some intersex black bears. So bears have a particularly high prevalence of intersex, or seem to. Black bears, polar bears, grizzly bears, and brown bears. This is a 7-year-old female black bear, and she has 2 cubs. She has ovaries, she has a uterus, she has mammae, and she has been observed lactating, but her anterior vagina has also developed into a penis. So the fact that she's intersex isn't stopping her reproducing, isn't stopping anything, she just happens to be intersex. So that's black bear. And then transgender lions, I love this story. So in Botswana, there was a pride of lions that was kind of somehow restricted access. So there were other prides around the outside. And so male lions couldn't really get in to this pride. It was quite isolated. And for whatever reason, the females decided that the males weren't doing a great job, and 5 females started to compete with each other, essentially to become a male. So they started roaring, mounting other females, fighting like males, scent marking, a whole bunch of other stuff that then they were doing. And as part of that, they were growing these manes, but when this one, and this is a picture of the lioness that won, when they won and became, to all intents and purposes, another boy lion in the group, the manes of the losers, the females that didn't kind of win, their manes receded. And this is the really crucial and important thing here, because often when we have things like this come up, people are like, oh, well, it's obviously a genetic mutation, it's a testosterone thing, it's, something that's happening at puberty in these lions. But here, this is clearly not a genetic variation, it's clearly not a testosterone thing, it's not a puberty thing, because 5 female lionesses, all at the same time, they weren't going through puberty at the same time, they all started to grow manes, they all started to behave like males, one won, the others then recessed backwards to be females again. So this was a physiological, biological change or set of changes that came about because of an environmental or social circumstance. And there's lots of evidence about lions. So if you search lioness with mane, there are lots of examples in captivity and in the wild. And of course, we're not observing all wild prides of lions at all times. So this is a relatively common happening. Non-binary hyenas. So both male and female hyenas have penises. Females mate with males by rolling up their penis to create a vagina, but females also mate with females, and under those circumstances they have to decide who's going to roll up and who doesn't. But this demonstrates a lack of strictly binary physiology in nature, but also in nature there are lots of examples where behavior is not binary. And so actually the wrens, even though there are males and females and intersex wrens as well, but in their pairings, they don't take on any kind of binary roles. So it's almost like one day the male will be the one that gets the food while the female sits on the nest, and then the next day it'll be the other way around, and there is no patterning to it at all. So yeah, there is a lot of evidence for non-binary behavior and non-binary physiology in nature. Gender fluid orangutans. So male orangutans fight for dominance. When one wins, his cheeks grow bigger. He gets bigger overall. His hair grows. His whole body mass increases. His penis extends. But then when the loser, on the other hand, their cheeks shrink and their other body parts shrink, and they literally become physiologically smaller. So with orangutans, they're a very good example because of the cheeks and how obvious they are. We can see that degree of maleness can be somehow fluid or variable based on social status and external environment. And I'm talking about physiological, biological maleness can be fluid or variable. So there's a plasticity and a changeability in our kind of biological sex and physiology, or can be, or there is in orangutans. And it was certainly follow through, especially with orangutans being primates, obviously.
Okay. Yeah, I've got no comments either. Hyenas. Intersex bears. Trans lions. It's utter cobblers. It's utter cobblers from beginning to end. I'm sitting there, barefaced, telling nonsense. Right? Absolute nonsense to 75 people who are HR people in some very high organisations, including public sector, the courts. There's somebody there from the courts. So they're sending this rubbish out to really big organisations, and they're doing it this year. Started this year, continued this year from what looks like previous work. So now that you've discovered that human beings are obviously akin to bears and hyenas and lions, when they are in fact more akin to orangutans, and this person knows very little about orangutans. Oh, Davina Twatborough knows very little about orangutans, I can tell you now. I know more about orangutans than she does. They're generally not aggressive. They can get aggressive, but they're generally not. They don't fight for dominance in the way, for example, that gorillas do. It's not the same. Has this person never seen Planet of the Apes? Do you remember? The orangutans were the thinkers. They were the philosophers, not the brute force. It's utterly deranged. And I thought to myself, right, we've reached the nadir. No, we haven't reached the nadir. Should we reach the nadir? Come with me to the nadir. Here we go.
So this is a quote by somebody. These guys were studying plants, and nobody cares about plants at all, but I love this quote. So when considering the scope of life on Earth, the notion of a constant sexual binary consisting of two distinct and disconnected forms is fundamentally a fallacy. And certainly they were studying the bush tomato plant, and it's a very fascinating study there. So, going back to labels and terminology for the last time, I think this slide now. So we've got intersex, which hopefully we now understand, trans-binary, which hopefully now we understand genitals and brain don't match, trans non-binary, this idea that kind of like roles and physiology might actually sit in the middle, in that kind of neutral space, and also then the concept of fluidity, this idea that actually our gender, even to a certain extent, aspects of our biological sex might be plastic, they might be fluid, they might be changeable. So going back now to the beginning here, the definition that we had, which was gender binary, a system in which gender is constructed into two strict categories of male or female. Gender identity is expected to align with sex assigned at birth, and gender expressions and roles fit traditional expectations. And so at the beginning, that might have seemed like it made total sense. And I'm hoping at this stage, you just might be questioning that a little bit. And then again, this diagram might at the beginning have looked like what we believe to be true. But actually, the picture is a little bit more like this. And I think what the aim of my work is, really what I want to bring to everyone's attention is that intersex people exist. Transgender people exist. Non-binary people exist. And gender fluid people exist. what are we going to do about it? And that's really over to you for that. But hopefully today you've learnt a little bit more about gender diversity and the biological and physiological scientific background to gender diversity.
Great. So human beings are tomatoes. It's Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Oh my gosh. So quote something from somebody who specialises in examining a particular type of tomato. It's the vegan version of David Attenborough. A particular type of tomato who makes a statement about diversity in the world of botany. That's what they were talking about. This Davina Twattenbury has gone, oh, well, tomatoes do it, you must be able to too. It gets even more gobsmacking when you get nearer the end. And one of the women that's attended the course actually says, I've realised through your course that I'm actually a male-female. All right. Transformed while sat in her kitchen on Zoom. Now, so then we get a recap of all the stuff that people still don't understand, but they're all nodding sagely. And now with the trans non-binaries, the non-binary trans, and the intersex, and they're all going, nodding like they understand the words she's talking about. It's absolutely hysterical. But it's worrying because there's so many people in there from big players who are actually buying this. Unbelievable. And then, of course, our sex, we're all stuck in the middle. There's no two sexes. There are only two sexes, love. Sorry, Davina Twattenborough. There are only two sexes. And biological sex is fluid. Well, it is if you tug hard enough. Oh, my God. And then it goes on to witter on for God knows how long. It makes absolutely no sense, as does none of the rest. Let's go.
Oh yes, Two-Spirit. Okay, so Two-Spirit, I love that. When I first heard Two-Spirit, I was going to adopt it for myself, and then I discovered it would be cultural appropriation. So Two-Spirit is a term that's used in the North Americas and in the Pacific Islands and around there. And when colonizers arrived, essentially there was a very rich understanding of gender, sexuality, relationships, the whole thing. And colonizers arrived with the binary gender story, heterosexuality and monogamy. And anybody who didn't fit into that cisgender, heterosexual, monogamous kind of box was given another name. Now, it wasn't Two-Spirit to start with. It was something that was derogatory and not nice. And actually the indigenous peoples kind of rose up and said, we're very unhappy about this name you've given us. And it was actually then in consultation that they actually came up with the name Two-Spirit that they decided they were happy with. But Two-Spirit, whilst it does kind of relate to gender, it also relates to sexuality and monogamy or non-monogamy. And so it's kind of more of a statement by indigenous peoples that we don't subscribe to your system, really. So yeah, that's where Two-Spirit came from.
Right, so there you go. She thought she was going to be a Two-Spirit person, but couldn't do it because she realised it was cultural appropriation. She's going out for a curry tonight. So then the whole lot comes in. Then you get critical social justice, you get critical race theory, you get queer theory. The colonialists came over with their binary gender story. It's just absolute unmitigated nonsense. The reason that people were called Two-Spirit or whatever the hell it is all to deal with homosexual and feminine men. It's all about that. Always was, and always will be, and always was. All right? It's just nonsense. Talking absolute rubbish about stuff that she has no understanding of whatsoever. I've never seen anything like it. But I may be wrong. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps she's actually spot on. I'm obviously a big thinker on the gender stage. Hopefully the first one out of town. But let's see. How does one implement this? What is the best way to get this education to the people of the workings of, for example, the Crown Prosecution Service, which were there, the various other organisations that were there? What do we do? What do we do from an educational point of view? Let's listen to the words of wisdom from Davina Twattenborough.
I said earlier at the CIPD guidance, and one of the things that comes out clearly in there, which I really want to reiterate, is this is not something for just HR to think about. It's got to be, like all these things, it's got to be a top-down kind of approach. And if it's being done well at the top level, then that actually might filter down through the organisation. So absolutely education, starting with leadership teams, but then actually just ensuring that people understand, because I think when people understand, we move to a place of acceptance, and then it's what do we do about this, rather than I don't agree with it. So no, absolutely, I would say the most important thing is education and understanding, because how can we write policies and procedures about something we don't understand? It's not possible. So getting to a point of understanding all of this before we write policies and procedures is really important.
So here's what we'll do. We'll do a top-down imposition. Get him at the top. And then it will all go down and there'll be empathy. It's utterly insane. It's not education, it's indoctrination. Because it's all rubbish, and you know as well as I do. And then what we'll do is we'll get an acceptance of cross-dressing AGP fetishists and LARPing women who think they're gay men. It's just an absolute outrage. The homophobia is ridden right through this entire nonsense. The unbelievable homophobia of the Chartered Institute of Pricks and Dicks, right? Unbelievable homophobia. That's simply what it is. And then, of course, she said, "Oh, it's not true. It's untrue. Actually, the biological." And it all goes on through nonsense, doesn't it? Until you realise that the fact that the truth needs to be told didn't stop her writing the training course, did it? It's a grift. Is it a grift? You tell me. I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Anyway, should we go on to see a bit more? Just because you are here, might as well watch it.
I think understanding the science is really important, because otherwise I think it gets to that point at the beginning of the second half of this talk where I kind of said about how a lot of people feel that anything other than intersex is a construct, it's just an idea in somebody's head. I think understanding that there is a biological and physiological underpinning to the other identities, so gender fluid, non-binary and trans-binary. I think understanding that there is a physiological, biological basis, I think that's minimum needs of understanding. Because I think when we understand that and we really do see that, people aren't making it up, they're actually different, I think that really fosters a greater sense of empathy and compassion. And so, I think, I without this piece of understanding, I think it becomes very, very, very tough, truthfully. So I think does that answer the question?
So this was a question that was asked about how do we get people to understand it, and she actually responded, the science. There is no science. The science. We must remember that there are biological and physiological bases for being a non-binary. And there is absolutely no biological thing at all. And like the training course, she's made it all up. It's just absolute nonsense. Mix a bit of the truth in with the lie, and it makes the lie more palatable. That's what I think I'm seeing here. But again, you tell me. Let's have a look and see what comes next.
There are some people who have had very few barriers to their life, so they've gone to school, they've done everything, and it's all been fine. And there are other people who don't have the same levels of privilege and who are in some way disadvantaged, possibly by their protected characteristics, And I think there's this sense, if you look at the CV of somebody who has had no problems in their life and everything's been a walk in the park, and the CV of somebody who's had a really difficult life, the chances are, the person who's had their difficulty, their CV is going to be better, their experience is going to be better, their grades are going to be better. Does that make them the better candidate? And I suppose that's the thing. If somebody's had it easy and they've achieved, well, good for them. But if somebody hasn't had it easy and they've still managed to achieve, wow, who do we want in our organisation? Someone who's had it easy all through their life, So I think it's something about realising people who, what is the best candidate? And if we're saying that on the surface of it, this CV is better than that CV, arguably that's the better CV. That might be we might perceive that to be the better candidate. But when we actually look at what's underneath this one, and we look at how hard they've had to work to get the grades that they've got, and how hard they've had to work to get the career that they've had, my gosh, their determination, their resilience, wow. Have that person in our organisation. So I think it's starting to realise that this diversity, equality and inclusion piece isn't about just making it right because it's the right thing to do. It's about realising that we're harnessing some really amazing talent in areas where, maybe people haven't had it quite so easy. Maybe they have had to fight a little bit harder, but actually their voice at the table and their effort and their resilience and their determination adds an awful lot to an organisation.
So this was about equity versus equality. People still get this wrong, don't they? Still get it wrong, and they do, most certainly, in a grand scale. They're all rattling on about equality and equity, and that's the point at which somebody says, I realised I'm a he-male, a she-male. I'm a male and a female. All right, okay. It's just absolutely deranged and totally confused. Now, that's it. That's all I've got for you, but it's probably very important to say at this point, because we're coming to the end now, that I laugh at this, and I honest to goodness, the trouble I had putting it together because I couldn't stop laughing was unbelievable. But the truth of the matter is, this is phenomenally dangerous. And there were 75 people in that meeting. I wonder how many the CIPD have already done and how many have been tainted with this ideological nonsense. They're embedding homophobia, misogyny, and mental illness into our organisations because that's what they do, because they are mad. And that's what we have to understand. They're completely mad. Human tomatoes. Stack the killer tomatoes. Human beings aren't clownfish, as you remember Aaron saying in his wonderful song. There is a serious edge to this. How do we stop it? I don't know. Shame them. How do we stop it? Don't buy the company's products. How do we stop it? Drop the CIPD an email and ask them what the hell they're playing at. I'll put the email, the contact email for the CIPD in the doobries as usual, right? Buy me a coffee, come be a warrior teacher, do a super thanks, whatever it is. That's the end of the CIPD analysis, and I've had more than enough. I don't know about you. Go well, good people.